What's the real difference between just a group of really talented people and a team that actually goes on to do something amazing? Well, more often than not, it comes down to one thing: great management. It's that special skill of getting things done through other people. So let's open up the manager's playbook and see exactly how it all works.
But first, we've got to tackle the big question that really sits at the heart of this whole field. Is management a science, with a set of rules and formulas you can follow? Or is it more of an art, something that relies on intuition, talent, and creativity? Well, the answer, it's a bit of both.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start by settling that whole art versus science debate once and for all. Then we'll walk step by step through the 5 core functions every single manager needs to master. That's planning, organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling. This is the whole playbook right here.
All right, let's dive right in. To really get to the bottom of this, we need to look at management from both of these angles, as a science and as an art.
Okay, here's how it breaks down. On one side, you can definitely say management is a science. There's a whole body of knowledge, universal principles that we've learned from decades of observation. For instance, we have data that shows fair bonuses can literally cause motivation to go up. But it's also an art. Why? Because you're dealing with people, and people are messy and unpredictable. That's where the art comes in. It's about skillfully applying those scientific principles to your unique team in your unique situation.
And this tension between art and science has really shaped how we think about management over the last century. We started out in the early 1900s focusing on pure efficiency, treating people kind of like cogs in a machine. Then the behavioral school came along and reminded us, hey, these are human beings. From there, we layered on data, systems thinking, and eventually we landed where we are today, with this idea that there's no single best way to manage. The real skill, the real art, is adaptability.
So, with that foundation set, let's jump into the very first function of management, planning. This is all about charting the course before the ship even leaves the harbor. Because, let's be honest, every single successful project starts with a solid plan.
And look, great planning isn't something you just do once and forget about. It's a continuous loop. You start by setting your vision, your destination. Then you analyze your situation. A SWOT analysis is a classic tool for this, looking at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. From there, you build your strategy and put it into action. But, and this is so crucial, you have to constantly evaluate how it's going and feed that information right back into the start of the process. It's a cycle.
Now, a really powerful tool you can use in planning is something called Management by Objectives, or MBO. The magic word here is collaboratively. The whole idea is that when employees help set their own specific, measurable goals, it creates this incredible sense of ownership. That clarity is a huge driver for motivation. Okay, so you have your plan. You know where you're going. But a plan is pretty useless if you don't have a structure to actually make it happen. And that brings us to our second function, organizing. This is all about building the machine, arranging all your resources to bring that plan to life. And one of the most fundamental choices you have to make when organizing is about power. Do you keep decision-making concentrated at the very top? That's centralization. It gives you tons of control and consistency. Or do you push that power down to the lower levels? That's decentralization. It leads to faster decisions and really empowers your team. There's a trade-off here, and the right call depends entirely on your specific situation.
So you've built the machine. Now it's time to assemble the crew. This is staffing, the critical human element of management. It's all about making sure you have the right people with the right skills in the right roles at exactly the right time. When it comes to finding those people, you've got another big strategic choice to make. Do you recruit internally by promoting your existing employees? It's faster, it's cheaper, and it's fantastic for morale. Or do you look outside the company to bring in fresh perspectives and new skills? Finding the right balance between these two is absolutely key to building a strong, dynamic team.
But staffing isn't just about hiring, right? It's about keeping your team engaged and motivated. And on this topic, the psychologist Frederick Hirschberg made a really important point. He basically said that preventing people from being unhappy is not the same thing as making them happy.
He called this his two-factor theory. So hygiene factors are the basics: a decent salary, safe working conditions, the essentials. If you don't have those, people will be actively dissatisfied. But just fixing them only gets people to a neutral baseline.
The real motivators are things like a sense of achievement, getting recognized for good work, having real responsibility. The bottom line for any manager is you have to address both of these.
All right, you've got a plan, you've got a structure, and you've got a motivated crew. Now it's time to actually steer the ship. This brings us to directing. This is the active, hands-on leadership that's needed to guide your team and get the work done day in and day out.
And a huge part of directing comes down to communication, which, let's face it, can be a total minefield. You can have misunderstandings just because of jargon, that's a semantic barrier, but you can also have psychological barriers, like distrust, or even organizational barriers, like a confusing chain of command. A great director, a great leader, is always on the lookout for these things, trying to keep those lines of communication wide open.
And finally, we arrive at our last function, controlling. Now, this isn't about being controlling in a negative, micromanaging way. Think of it more like checking the compass. It's about monitoring your team's performance against the plan you made and then making small course corrections along the way to make sure you actually reach your destination.
And the control process itself is a beautifully simple four-step loop. First, you set the standards. What does success even look like? Second, you measure what's actually happening. Third, you compare reality to your standard. And fourth, if there's a gap, you take corrective action to get back on track. This is the feedback loop that turns a plan from a piece of paper into a reality. So, as we wrap things up here, what's the one thing you should really take away from this whole playbook? It's this. These 5 functions, they aren't a checklist you just work through one time. They are a living, breathing, interconnected system. Think of it all together like this. Planning sets your destination. Organizing builds the ship. Staffing finds that perfect crew. Directing steers the ship through the open water. And controlling is what keeps you checking the compass to make sure you stay on course. You see, every single part is essential for the journey to be successful.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. As you reflect on this playbook, what's the single biggest management challenge you see out there in the world today? And in your own experience, where do you see that fascinating blend of science and art that makes managing people such a tough but rewarding challenge?